Chosen one. What was held back was never denied, it was reserved. What you are about to hear is not coincidence, not algorithm, not chance. This moment has been appointed. There was a reason the door stayed closed longer than you expected, a reason the answer did not come when you were ready for it. Heaven was not withholding out of punishment, but out of precision. Chosen one. There are releases that arrive too early and destroy the vessel, and there are releases that arrive on time and establish legacy. What you are stepping into now is not rushed, not forced, not borrowed. It is authorized. It is clean. It is complete. The delay trained your spirit. The silence refined your discernment. The pressure prepared your capacity. Anointed one. The same God who taught you restraint has now issued permission. What once required patience now responds to obedience. What once felt hidden is now being handed to you openly. As it is written in the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31, "Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." You waited. Now strength is being converted into substance. Chosen one, stay present. Let your heart be still. And if your spirit recognizes this moment quietly, align yourself, stay connected, remain under this covering, and let heaven know you are ready. What was withheld has now been released to you. Chosen one. What you are sensing right now is not imagination, and it is not emotional hype. It is recognition. Something deep inside you knows that a door has shifted in the unseen. For a long time it felt like you were standing on the edge of something promised, yet just out of reach. You prayed, you prepared, you stayed faithful longer than most people ever would, and still it felt like heaven was quiet. But hear me clearly now, anointed one, the silence was not absence, it was authorization forming. There are seasons where God does not answer quickly because he is doing something more dangerous than comfort. He is building capacity. I know this personally. I remember seasons in my own life where I did everything right and nothing moved. Bills still showed up. Opportunities still stalled. People still overlooked me. And the hardest part was not the lack, it was the question of why. Why now? Why not yet? Why does it seem like others receive what I've been praying for? That question can either harden you or humble you. And humility is the currency heaven responds to. Chosen one. What was withheld was never about punishment. It was about protection. There are blessings that look good too early, but would have destroyed your identity if they had arrived when you first asked. There are levels of wealth, influence, and favor that cannot be carried by an unhealed nervous system or an unanchored spirit. God did not delay you because you were unworthy. He delayed you because you were chosen, and chosen vessels require reinforcement before release. You didn't just survive the waiting, you were trained by it. Every closed door taught you discernment. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every lonely night rewired your dependence away from people and toward God. You learned how to stand without applause. You learned how to obey without reassurance. And that is why heaven can now trust you with more. As it is written in Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 3, the vision waits for its appointed time, but when it speaks, it does not lie. Chosen one. The appointed time is no longer ahead of you. It is responding to you. What is happening now will feel sudden, but it is not random. It is the result of years of unseen obedience colliding with divine timing. That is how God moves. He does not announce everything while he is building it. He reveals it when it is ready to stand. And what is being released to you now is not just provision, it is alignment. Things that once required effort will begin to flow. Connections will appear without forcing. Doors will open without you begging. Not because you became louder, but because heaven decided it was time. Anointed One, I need you to understand something that will protect you in this next season. When release comes after delay, it often arrives quietly. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up as peace where anxiety used to live. Sometimes it shows up as clarity where confusion once ruled. Sometimes it shows up as an idea that won't leave you alone. Do not dismiss the subtlety. God often moves gently when He is moving permanently. I've learned this the hard way. In moments when I expected a dramatic breakthrough, God gave me direction instead. And I almost missed it because I was looking for relief, not responsibility. But responsibility is how God proves trust. When what was withheld begins to be released, it will require your agreement, not your striving, your surrender. This is not the season to rush. This is the season to move in rhythm. Chosen One, there is a wealth shift connected to your obedience, but it is not the kind that just inflates numbers. It is the kind that stabilizes your life, the kind that allows you to breathe again, the kind that restores dignity, not just comfort. God is not just giving you money, He is giving you margin. Margin to think clearly, margin to choose wisely, margin to say no when needed, margin to build something that outlives you. And hear this clearly, Anointed One, this release will not look like how you imagined it when you were desperate. It will look cleaner, quieter, more controlled. That is because desperation is no longer your posture. Authority is. You are not entering this next chapter as someone hoping God will come through. You are entering it as someone God has already endorsed. Do not rush to explain this season to people who did not walk with you through the last one. Not everyone deserves access to what heaven just unlocked. There are things that grow best in privacy. Guard your spirit, guard your focus, guard your alignment. What is being released to you now is sensitive, and it responds to stewardship. Chosen One, if you feel a strange calm settling over you, even as your circumstances are still catching up, that is confirmation. Peace is always the first evidence of divine release. Before the resources shift, the inner world stabilizes. Before the elevation manifests, the identity locks in. That is what is happening now. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not catching up. You are arriving. And what was withheld has now been released, not because you demanded it, but because you became ready to carry it without losing yourself. Stay present. Stay grounded. Stay surrendered. Heaven is not experimenting with you. Heaven is entrusting you. Chosen One, there is a shift that happens after release is authorized, but before manifestation becomes visible, and this is where many people misinterpret what God is doing. They think nothing is happening because everything still looks the same on the outside, but this is the most sacred phase of all. This is the moment where heaven begins rearranging your inner world to match what is coming toward you. And if you are not discerning, you will mistake preparation for delay and pull yourself out of alignment right before things change. I want to speak to you from experience here. There were seasons where I thought God had finally opened the door, yet my environment stayed tight. Money didn't move immediately. People didn't change overnight. Circumstances didn't magically soften. And I remember thinking, did I hear wrong? But what I didn't understand then is that release does not begin in your circumstances. It begins in your posture. God always changes the carrier before He changes what is carried. Chosen One, the reason your spirit feels different lately is because your posture has shifted. You are no longer reaching upward in panic. You are standing upright in expectation. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. And alignment is dangerous to old limitations. When alignment enters, certain relationships start feeling heavy, certain conversations drain you, certain habits no longer fit. This is not loss. This is gravity changing. Anointed One. The release you are stepping into will require discernment more than effort. In your last season, effort was necessary. You had to push, you had to endure, you had to survive. But this season is not built on survival. It is built on stewardship. God is not asking you to prove how strong you are anymore. He is asking you to show how well you can listen. There is a difference between chasing provision and responding to instruction. Chasing exhausts you. Responding positions you. And right now, heaven is not asking you to run faster. Heaven is asking you to move cleaner. That is why distractions are falling away. That is why your tolerance for chaos is lower. That is why you are less interested in explaining yourself. You are being trained to move with precision, not noise. I remember a time when I felt God telling me to slow down right when I thought acceleration was coming. Everything in me wanted to hurry because I had waited so long. But slowing down was the instruction that protected the blessing, because what was being released was not meant to be spent, it was meant to be built. And building requires vision, patience, and restraint. Chosen One, what is being released to you now carries responsibility. Not pressure, but weight. There is a difference. Pressure comes from fear. Weight comes from purpose. And if you confuse the two, you will rush what God intended to establish. This is not the season to announce everything. This is the season to observe, to pray, to adjust, to listen carefully. You may notice that people are responding to you differently now. Some will respect you more without knowing why. Others will distance themselves without explanation. This is not coincidence. Favor rearranges rooms before it rearranges accounts. Authority shifts atmospheres before it shifts outcomes. When God begins elevating someone, He quietly changes how others perceive them, even if they cannot articulate it. Anointed One, do not be alarmed if some people misunderstand you in this season. Elevation often exposes insecurity in others, and you are not called to shrink to make them comfortable. You are called to remain obedient. I learned this the hard way. I tried to bring everyone with me into a season they were not prepared for, and it almost cost me my peace. God had to teach me that not everyone who walked with you in lack can stand next to you in abundance. This is not because you are better. It is because abundance amplifies everything. It amplifies motives. It amplifies wounds. It amplifies intentions. And God is protective of what He is releasing to you. That is why He allowed separation before elevation. That is why He let certain ties weaken naturally. You were not being punished. You were being shielded. Chosen One. I need you to understand this deeply. What is coming will require you to trust God even more than you did in the waiting. Waiting taught you endurance. Release will teach you discernment. Endurance keeps you faithful under pressure. Discernment keeps you clean under favor. Both are necessary, but they are not the same muscle. You may feel a strange tension right now, a mix of excitement and sobriety. That is healthy. That is the tension of transition. You are standing between what was and what is becoming. And in this space, God often speaks softly. He does not shout instructions because He has already trained your spirit to recognize His voice. You will feel it as a nudge, a pause, a hesitation, or a quiet clarity that does not argue with you. It settles you. As it is written in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there is a time for everything under heaven. And chosen one, your time is no longer theoretical, it is operational. That means your decisions now carry more weight than before. Small compromises will cost more. Small obediences will multiply faster. This is not meant to scare you. It is meant to focus you. I want to be honest with you. When God first began releasing things in my life after a long delay, I almost sabotaged it by treating it like a reward instead of an assignment. I wanted relief. God wanted structure. I wanted comfort. God wanted sustainability. And I had to learn that blessings meant to last require a different mindset than blessings meant to rescue. Chosen one. This release is not here to rescue you. It is here to partner with you. God is not taking over your life. He is inviting you to co-labor with Him at a higher level. That is why your prayers are changing. You are asking different questions now. You are less focused on why and more focused on how should I move. That is maturity. Do not underestimate the power of consistency in this season. You do not need to make dramatic moves. You need to make aligned ones. Heaven is not impressed by speed. Heaven responds to agreement. When you move in agreement, provision follows quietly and stays longer. Chosen one, if you feel a holy stillness settling over you as you listen to this, that is confirmation. Stillness is not stagnation. It is stability being installed. God stabilizes what He plans to elevate, so it does not collapse under its own growth. You are being stabilized. Remain humble, remain teachable, remain attentive. What was withheld has been released, but how it unfolds will depend on how well you steward this sacred in between. And you are not alone in this. The same God who carried you through the delay is walking with you into the release, step by step, moment by moment, with precision and care. Chosen one. There is another layer to this release that many people are not prepared to recognize, and it is this: when God releases what was withheld, He does not only release things to you, He releases you from things. This is where the shift becomes unmistakable. You are not just receiving, you are shedding. Old mindsets, old reactions, old survival instincts begin to fall away sometimes without you even trying, and that can feel disorienting if you do not understand what is happening. I want to slow this down with you because this part matters. In the waiting season, you learned how to cope. You learned how to manage stress, disappointment, uncertainty. You learned how to function under pressure, but coping is not the same as living. And now that heaven has authorized release, God is inviting you out of coping mode and into clarity. That transition can feel uncomfortable because coping feels familiar even when it is painful. Chosen one. You may notice that things that once triggered anxiety in you no longer hit the same way. Situations that used to spiral your thoughts now pass through you with less resistance. This is not numbness. This is healing. This is your nervous system catching up to the truth that you are no longer in danger. For a long time, your spirit was ahead of your circumstances. Now your inner world is being updated to match where you are actually going. I remember a moment in my own life when I realized I no longer reacted the way I used to. Something happened that should have sent me into panic, but it didn't. Instead, there was a quiet awareness. This no longer has power over me. And that's when I understood that God had done a deeper work than I could see. He had not just answered prayers, He had rewired my response system. Anointed one. This release is not just external, it is neurological, emotional, spiritual. God is restoring your ability to trust again without becoming reckless, to hope again without becoming desperate, to believe again without losing discernment. That balance is rare, and it is the mark of someone who has been trained by delay. Do not rush this phase. When old fears surface briefly, do not assume you are regressing. Sometimes fear shows up one last time to see if it still has access. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to analyze it. Simply do not partner with it. Fear starves when ignored. Faith grows when acknowledged. Chosen 1. One of the clearest signs that release has begun is this: your tolerance for misalignment drops sharply. You feel it in your body. Certain conversations feel heavy. Certain environments feel loud. Certain expectations feel off. This is not you becoming arrogant or difficult. This is your spirit rejecting what no longer fits your future. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. I stayed connected to spaces God had already moved me out of because I didn't want to appear ungrateful or changed. But staying out of obligations slowly drained what God was building in me, and eventually God made it uncomfortable enough that I had no choice but to let go, not because He was angry, but because He was protecting what He had invested. Chosen one. You do not need to explain your growth to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Growth always looks like abandonment to those who benefit from your stagnation. You are not called to convince, you are called to obey. And obedience often looks quiet, not dramatic. There is also a financial dimension to this release that I want to speak to carefully. Not hype, not fantasy, reality. When God releases provision after delay, it rarely arrives all at once. It comes in layers, systems, opportunities, strategies. Why? Because sudden overflow without structure often recreates old stress at a higher level. God is not interested in overwhelming you. He is interested in establishing you. You may find yourself thinking differently about money now, less emotional, less reactive, more intentional. That is not coincidence. That is stewardship being installed. You are no longer asking, "How do I get more?" You are asking, "What am I supposed to build?" That shift alone will change your financial trajectory. As it is written in Proverbs chapter 4, wisdom is the principal thing. God does not just give wealth, He gives wisdom first, so wealth does not corrupt the carrier. And wisdom often looks like restraint, patience, and long-term thinking. If you feel less impulsive lately, that is evidence of release, not delay. Anointed one, do not underestimate the spiritual authority that comes with self-control. In a world addicted to instant gratification, restraint is power. You learned restraint in the waiting. Now God is teaching you how to use it in abundance. That is a rare combination. You may also notice that your prayers are quieter now, less begging, less explaining, more listening. That is not distance, that is intimacy. God does not need you to perform faith. He is responding to alignment. Silence does not mean nothing is happening. Often it means everything is settled. I want to speak to the exhaustion you carried for so long, the kind that sleep didn't fix, the kind that came from carrying uncertainty day after day. That exhaustion was not weakness. It was evidence that you were holding more than you were meant to hold alone. And now slowly that weight is lifting, not because life suddenly became easy, but because you are no longer carrying it without support. Chosen one, rest is not laziness in this season. Rest is obedience. God restores strength before He expands responsibility. If you feel drawn to stillness, honor it. If you feel prompted to simplify, obey it. You are not falling behind. You are syncing up. There is also something deeply personal about this release that I want to acknowledge. For many of you, what was withheld wasn't just money or opportunity. It was recognition, safety, belonging, the feeling of being seen. And God is healing that wound at the root. He is showing you that your worth was never dependent on external validation. And when that truth settles, everything else follows more easily. I remember the moment I stopped needing people to see me a certain way. It didn't make me cold. It made me free. And freedom is fertile ground for favor. When you are no longer chasing approval, you can hear instruction clearly. When you are no longer proving yourself, you can build without pressure. Chosen one. The release you are walking into is not flashy. It is foundational. It is the kind that lasts. It is the kind that still works when emotions fluctuate. It is the kind that remains steady when life gets noisy. This is not a temporary breakthrough. This is a shift in operating system. Do not measure this season by how loud it looks. Measure it by how stable you feel. Measure it by how clear your decisions are becoming. Measure it by how much peace is replacing panic. That is the true evidence of divine release. What was withheld has now been released, not as chaos, not as overload, but as order. And order is how God establishes things that cannot be shaken. Chosen one, there comes a moment after inner stabilization where God begins to test something very specific, not your faith, but your alignment. This is where many people misunderstand the nature of divine release. They think once peace arrives, the work is done. But peace is not the destination. Peace is the foundation. What follows is direction. And direction requires obedience that is precise, not emotional. You may notice that you are being nudged toward decisions that don't make sense to everyone else. Not reckless decisions, quiet ones, subtle ones. Things like stepping back when you could push forward, saying no when you could say yes, waiting when you could rush. These are not delays. These are calibrations. God is aligning your timing with His outcome. I want to speak honestly here because this part separates those who receive a momentary breakthrough from those who walk into sustained elevation. When God begins releasing what was withheld, He will often give you instructions that feel smaller than the promise. And if you're not careful, pride will try to override obedience. You'll be tempted to think, after everything I've been through, shouldn't it look bigger than this? But heaven does not build loudly at first. Heaven builds correctly. I remember a season when God gave me an opportunity that looked almost underwhelming compared to what I had envisioned during the waiting, and my ego struggled. I wanted something dramatic, something that justified the pain. But God was offering something stable, something scalable, and I had to choose whether I trusted my imagination or His wisdom. That choice changed everything. Chosen one. The release you are walking into now is layered. God is not dumping everything into your hands at once, because He is teaching you how to move with Him, not ahead of Him. Each layer requires your agreement. Each step requires humility. And humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is staying responsive to instruction, even when you feel confident. Anointed one. This is also the phase where God begins to shift how you measure success. In your previous season, success may have meant survival, paying the bills, making it through another month, holding on. But now success is being redefined. Success looks like peace without avoidance, clarity without control, momentum without burnout. That is a higher metric. Do not be surprised if God starts closing doors that you prayed would open years ago. Those doors made sense for who you were, then not who you are becoming. What once felt like opportunity may now feel like distraction. And that is not loss, it is accuracy. I want you to hear this clearly. Chosen one, you are not being pulled away from things because they are bad. You are being pulled away because they are no longer aligned. Alignment is stricter than morality. Something can be good and still not be yours anymore. That discernment will save you years. There is also a relational shift happening for many of you, and it requires courage to acknowledge it. You are finding that some relationships no longer nourish you the way they once did. Conversations stay on the surface. Energy feels mismatched. You leave interactions more tired than encouraged. This does not mean those people are evil. It means seasons are changing. I had to learn that honoring someone does not always mean staying connected at the same level. Sometimes honor looks like distance. Sometimes love looks like release. And God will never ask you to betray your future to preserve familiarity. If you feel guilt rising as you consider letting go, ask yourself, is this guilt from God or from fear of being misunderstood? Chosen one. Misunderstanding is often the cost of obedience, and obedience always costs less than disobedience in the long run. There is a financial clarity emerging in this season that will feel unfamiliar at first. Not because you suddenly have everything, but because you are no longer operating from fear. You may find yourself spending less impulsively, planning more intentionally, thinking longer term. This is not restriction, this is wisdom activating. I remember the first time I realized I was no longer making financial decisions from anxiety. It felt strange, almost empty. And then I realized peace had replaced urgency. That shift alone prevented mistakes I would have made just a year earlier. God was not increasing my income first. He was increasing my discernment, and discernment multiplied the impact of what I already had. Anointed one. This is how heaven-backed wealth shifts begin. Not with jackpots, but with judgment. Not with overflow, but with order. God brings order before abundance, so abundance does not destroy what order built. As it is written in Matthew chapter 6, seek first the kingdom and everything else will be added. Notice the order. Seek first, then addition follows. God is reordering your priorities so addition does not become distraction. You may also feel a stronger pull towards solitude at times, not isolation solitude. A desire to be quiet, to reflect, to process internally. Do not resist this. Solitude is where instruction becomes clear. Noise distorts guidance. Silence sharpens it. In solitude, you will begin to notice patterns. You will recognize where you used to self-sabotage. You will see how God protected you from things you once begged for, and gratitude will replace regret. That perspective shift is critical. You cannot steward release while resenting delay. Gratitude completes the cycle. Chosen one. There is also an invitation in this season to forgive yourself for the decisions you made when you didn't know better, for the time you lost, for the energy you wasted. Carrying shame into a season of release will contaminate it. Shame convinces you that you must rush to make up for lost time. God is not rushed, and He is not asking you to punish yourself for surviving. I had to forgive myself for choices made under pressure, for staying too long in places that drained me, for not trusting my instincts sooner. And when I did, something unlocked. Clarity returned. Creativity returned. Peace deepened. Self-forgiveness is not self-indulgence. It is alignment with how God sees you. Chosen one, you are not behind. You are not late. You are not compensating. You are moving forward with wisdom you did not have before, and that wisdom is what makes this release sustainable. The final thing I want to anchor here is this: you do not need to announce what God is doing in your life right now. Let it mature. Let it stabilize. Let it speak for itself. Fruit does not advertise while it is growing. It reveals itself when it is ripe. Stay obedient. Stay grounded. Stay teachable. What was withheld has now been released, but it is being released to a version of you that can carry it without losing peace, integrity, or direction. And that is the real miracle. Chosen one, as this release settles into your life, there is one final transformation that must take place, not outside of you, but within how you see yourself. This is where the journey truly completes its turn. For a long time you learned how to endure, how to wait, how to remain faithful when nothing moved. Then you learned how to stabilize, how to listen, how to align. Now comes the moment where you must fully step into identity, not the identity shaped by lack, delay, or survival, but the identity heaven has always recognized. This is often the quietest shift, and yet it is the most powerful. Because once identity changes, behavior follows naturally. You no longer have to force discipline. You no longer have to convince yourself to make wise decisions. You move differently because you see yourself differently. And this is what God has been preparing you for all along. Chosen one. There is a version of you that no longer asks for permission to exist at a higher level. Not because you became prideful, but because you finally became anchored. Anchored in truth. Anchored in calling. Anchored in the understanding that you are not chasing blessing, you are stewarding assignment. I remember the moment this clicked for me. Nothing dramatic happened externally. No announcement, no applause. But internally, something settled. I stopped negotiating with fear. I stopped over-explaining my choices. I stopped waiting for confirmation from people who never had authority over my calling to begin with. That internal shift changed how I showed up everywhere else. And that is what God is doing in you now. Anointed one, this is where many people hesitate because stepping into identity feels exposed. You can hide behind humility when you feel small. You can hide behind patience when you are waiting. But identity requires ownership. It requires you to accept that God has trusted you with something real, something weighty, something that will affect others. And that responsibility can feel intimidating if you are still carrying the mindset of the waiting season. But hear me clearly, God would not have released what was withheld if you were not ready to carry it. Doubt at this stage is not discernment, it is residue, and residue does not get the final word. You may feel moments where your old self tries to resurface. Old thoughts, old comparisons, old insecurities. This does not mean the work wasn't real, it means you are crossing into new territory. Every new level exposes the last layer of fear so it can be left behind. Do not panic when that happens. Simply do not partner with it. Chosen one identity is not something you announce. It is something you inhabit. You will notice it in how you speak. Your words will carry less urgency and more authority. You will notice it in how you choose. You will choose peace over proving yourself, alignment over attention, integrity over acceleration. These choices will not feel forced anymore. They will feel natural. There is also a sacred confidence that begins to rise in this stage. Not the loud kind, not the performative kind, the quiet kind that does not need to dominate a room to change it. People will feel it when you walk in. They may not know why they trust you, why they listen more closely, why your presence feels steady. That is not charisma. That is congruence. Your inner world and outer actions are finally in agreement. I want to speak to the fear some of you have about losing people as you step into this identity. You are not losing people. You are revealing alignment. Those who can walk with you in truth will adjust. Those who cannot will drift. This is not failure. This is filtration. And filtration protects what God is building. I had to grieve certain connections I thought would last forever. Not because there was conflict, but because there was divergence. And once I stopped trying to pull people into seasons they were not assigned to, peace returned. God does not require you to drag your past into your future to prove loyalty. Loyalty to God sometimes looks like releasing what He has already moved you beyond. Chosen one. The wealth shift connected to this release is inseparable from identity. Not because wealth defines you, but because identity governs how wealth behaves in your life. When identity is unstable, wealth becomes volatile. When identity is anchored, wealth becomes a tool. You will notice that your desires are changing. You are less interested in impressing and more interested in impact. Less focused on how things look and more focused on how they last. This is not maturity that came from age. This is maturity that came from obedience. As it is written in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, God loves a cheerful giver, not just financially, but energetically. Cheerfulness in this sense is alignment. You are no longer giving from depletion. You are moving from overflow. And overflow does not rush. Overflow flows. There is a calm authority settling into your life now, and it will confuse people who remember the old version of you. They may expect you to react, explain, defend. And when you don't, they will project their discomfort onto you. Let them. You are not responsible for managing other people's interpretations of your growth. Chosen one. This is the season where consistency matters more than intensity. You do not need to make dramatic moves. You need to make faithful ones. Show up. Do the work. Stay aligned. Heaven does not measure success by how fast things happen, but by how well they endure. I want to leave you with this truth because it seals everything we've spoken about. What was withheld was not held back to test your patience. It was held back to protect your identity. And now that your identity has been fortified, the release can flow without destroying what matters most. You are not entering chaos. You are entering order. You are not stepping into pressure. You are stepping into purpose. You are not walking into uncertainty. You are walking into agreement with what heaven has already decided. Chosen one, let this season unfold without force. Let it mature without announcement. Let it stabilize without fear. You have been prepared. You have been refined. You have been aligned. What was withheld has now been released, not to overwhelm you, not to rush you, not to prove anything to anyone, but to establish you in a life that is rooted, sustainable, and divinely backed. Remain humble, remain obedient, remain present. Heaven is not asking you to become someone new. Heaven is finally giving you permission to be who you were always meant to be. Chosen one, as this moment comes to rest in your spirit, know this with certainty: nothing you have walked through was wasted, and nothing that has been released to you will be withdrawn. Heaven does not open doors casually. What has begun now is sealed by purpose, guarded by timing, and carried by grace. Anointed one, you are standing in your kairos moment, the exact intersection of preparation and promise. What was once delayed has now been dispatched. What was once hidden is now in motion. Even if your eyes have not yet seen it fully, your spirit recognizes the shift. That recognition is confirmation. The transfer has already begun. I declare peace over your mind, clarity over your decisions, and courage over your next steps. May every resource, relationship, and opportunity align effortlessly with what God has ordained for you. May you move forward without fear, without striving, and without doubt, knowing that the same hand that sustained you in the waiting is now guiding you in the release. Chosen one, remain faithful. Stay aligned. Walk gently and confidently into what is unfolding. Let gratitude guard your heart as manifestation catches up with what heaven has already approved. And if this word resonated deeply with you, you may quietly mark this moment by staying connected, sharing the message, or leaving a simple sign of agreement below. May what has been released to you now establish you for generations to come.